And the key message I want you all to take away today is conservative leadership matters. Conservative policies matter. They matter at every level of government. They matter at the federal level, they matter at the state level, they matter at the local level. When we have conservative leadership and conservative policies, people prosper. When we don't, we see failure. And that has been all too obvious over the course of the last 15 months of this Biden administration. Let's contrast what happened before on a number of different issues. Let's think back to the Trump administration and how we saw under the Trump era policies that our country was prospering. We had more Americans employed than any other time in our history. We saw income inequality shrink for the first time in decades. We saw the lowest African American, Asian American, Latino American unemployment rates ever in the history of our country. We saw the president taking on trade deals to make those fair for our citizens, not giving away benefits to other countries. We saw a nation that was strong in the world, that people respected. We saw our nation become energy independent for the first time in decades. We saw a strong border. Now, what do we see today? A country that is gripped by weakness. The Biden administration has undermined our strength as a country. Let's start with the worst inflation we have seen in 40 years. All the growth we had during the Trump administration didn't lead to this type of inflation. But with the Biden administration's policies, it has. So for example, between March of 2020 and March of 21, the Fed doubled our balance sheet. What does that mean? They borrowed a bunch of money. Unelected officials borrowed a bunch of money without our say-so. And then, in March of 21, with this bonfire built and gasoline poured on it, the Biden administration threw the match by passing the partisan stimulus package, $1.9 trillion of more spending. And that lit the flame of inflation. And we have seen that inflation run rampant for the last year. Inflation is one of the most corrosive things to our American families. It is that silent killer that undermines our buying power, undermines the quality of life of every family in this country. And that's what the Biden administration has kicked off to make us weak at home. We see it in every aspect of our lives. And then to compound that, the Biden administration has made us energy dependent again. They have blocked off, they have refused to be able to issue permits on federal lands. The president will say, oh, there's 9,000 permits out there already. But the reality is, his administration is blocking those. There's only about 1,500 of them that are being actively worked right now. And in a break from past practice, there has not been one single auction for energy drilling on federal land since the Biden administration has come to power. Not one single auction of those permits on federal land when they used to happen quarterly in previous administrations. And then he'll say, well, there's permits out there already. But I've talked to my colleagues, the governors of North Dakota and Alaska. And while there may be permits out there, the federal government is blocking the pipeline access so they can't get that energy to where it needs to go. And on permits already out there, like in ANWR, Alaska National Wildlife Reserve, permits that are already issued to companies, the federal government is trying to renege on those permits and take them back, trying to block them. And just this week, we've seen the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, say they are going to start requiring companies to say how they're impacting the climate when they're going public. That is not their job. That is not their mission. This is an administration that has been taken over by radical environmentalists and pushing their agenda to the detriment of our country. So the president will try and blame gas prices on the war in Ukraine, but we all know gas prices are going up way before Russia invaded Ukraine. And that's contributing to this overall inflation. And then, what's the solution? Well, let's go ask Iran and Venezuela to pump more oil. Our enemies. It is craziness. But it just shows how this administration is out of touch with America. You know, another one of the president's plan is this thing called the 30 by 30 program.
Nope.
Put 30% of our country into conservation by the year 2030.
Nope.
Again, driven by radical environmentalists.
Not gonna happen.
Now, first of all, our country, according to their own records, is about 12% in conservation. And that means, and according to the radical environmentalists, when they say conservation, they mean they don't want it used by humans. Certainly not for energy exploration, but not for even for hiking or camping. They do not want that land used. They want 30% of our country put into that. They want to block all of our resources, our energy resources here in this country, and put that land into conservation so we can't get it. And here in Nebraska, where 97% of our land is privately owned, what does that mean? We keep asking, they won't tell us. And think about the craziness of their plan. You know, they just last week said the cafe standards, you have to have cars going up to 40 miles per gallon. That you have, he wants 50% of all cars and trucks to be electric by the year 2050. And by the way, his own energy department says that's not gonna happen, it's only gonna be like 80%. What do you need to make electric cars?
Lithium.
Batteries. What do you need to make batteries?
Lithium.
Rare earth elements. Where are we getting those rare earth elements? China. So it's not enough that he wants to make us dependent on our enemies like Venezuela and Iran and Russia. Now he wants to make us dependent on a country that is an existential threat to our nation, China. And we have those rare earth elements here in our country. We can mine them here, but he wants to put aside 30% of our country into conservation so we can't even get to them. That's the kind of craziness of policies this Biden administration is pursuing. Or we think about the southern border. Under the Trump administration, we saw illegal crossings drop to a 40-year low because of the policies like Remain in Mexico. And what did the Biden administration, when they came into office, they rushed to undo all those policies. Stop building the wall. Guess what, folks? Walls work. Physical barriers work. Myself and some of my fellow governors reached out to the White House and said, hey, this is a big deal. It impacts not just the border states like Texas and Arizona, but it impacts us here in Nebraska. In fact, the Omaha DEA last year confiscated 26 kilograms of fentanyl, enough for 13 million lethal doses. That was 10 times what they confiscated the previous year. 10 times. When you see you have an open border like we do at the southern border, you see drugs flowing across. You see human trafficking. Horrible, horrible crimes. And the Biden administration is doing nothing. We had Customs and Border Patrol had 2 million interactions with people coming across the border illegally last year, and it's supposed to be more this year. And now the president, the CDC just announced that they're going to revoke Title 42 on May 23rd. It's going to be even higher. So we asked the president, can we meet with you? Can we talk to you about this? And we got radio silence. In fact, what we got was snarky remarks from his press secretary, Jen Psaki, saying, well, where's the governor's plan? Well, that's what we wanted to meet about. We wanted to tell you our plan. But if you're not going to meet with us, we'll tell you what our plan is. And so my colleagues and I went down to the southern border. We went to go help out Greg Abbott. In fact, we sent members of our state patrol down there. We got members of our National Guard down there right now. And he's called out his National Guard at the state expense to be able to help protect the borders that the federal government won't protect. And we laid out our 10-point plan and how we knew that this would slow down those illegal crossings because it was the same policies that Trump had employed to bring those crossings to a 40-year low. We know these policies work because Trump put them in place and they worked. And the president's continued to ignore us. And illegal immigrants continue to come across our border. And when they get put in custody, you know what happens? They get a court date. 2 years in the future. How many of you folks do you think actually show up?
About 3%.
Yeah, almost none. And we were talking to the folks down there on the border, the Customs and Border Patrol, the National Guard. The very few people who do show up, they've been here for years. And so you know what the judge says? Oh, you've been here for a long time. I'm gonna give you a couple of months to get your affairs over before you have to go back to your home country. Do you think they show up again? No. The president is not enforcing our borders. Conservative policies matter. Conservative policies under the Trump administration and conservative leadership made us a strong country and gave us a strong border, made us energy independent. When we don't have that, we see the consequences. The consequences of that bad policy are the victims. The victims that we have when we have drug overdoses or sex trafficking, or the inflation that eats away at our families' financial well-being. That's what happens when we have weak administrations. We also see it when it comes to managing this pandemic. The Biden administration solution was a vaccine mandate, trying to make OSHA a public health organization, to force that on employers here in this country. And it was the states, the Republican-led states, which pushed back against that and took it to court and got that thrown out so the president couldn't enforce his agenda through a regulatory system that was not designed to do it. I was actually testifying in front of Congress by Zoom because they didn't let anybody be in person about pandemic response. And I told, these were majority Democrats, right? I said, you all should be very afraid of this. The president is trying to usurp powers from you, the legislature. Because only you're the ones that's supposed to pass laws. That's an expansion of executive authority. When President Trump was in power, you guys were screaming about this. Now you do nothing? We also see it in how states are managed. You know, here in Nebraska, we took a balanced approach. We slowed the spread of the virus, kept our mortality rates down, and kept kids in schools, and kept people working. Because of that, we have the lowest unemployment rate, not only in the United States, but in the history of the state of Nebraska. We have 16,000 more people employed today than we did pre-pandemic. In manufacturing, our second biggest industry, we have more people employed today in manufacturing than we have at any time since June of 2008. Our economy is strong because we didn't kill it during the pandemic. In fact, Politico, which if any of you know that organization, is not exactly a conservative news source. Politico ranked all the states in their pandemic response. They looked at health, social well-being, education, and economy. And Nebraska came out ranked number 1. And what do we see then? If you look at the top 10 states with lowest unemployment rate, they're all Republican states. The bottom 10 states, they're all Democrat states. The top 10 states for quickest recovery from the pandemic, all Republican states. The bottom 10 states for slowest recovery, all Democrat states. Every single one. Conservative leadership matters. Conservative policies matter.
Election integrity matters.
And we see it here at the state level as well. What has happened to our State Board of Education? They have gone off the rails. It was about a year ago when they came out with their sex education standards. Now, mind you, they are not required to produce sex education standards. In fact, the legislature twice in the last decade has declined to make them part of the requirement for the State Board of Education. So this is driven by themselves on their own by an activist member of the State Board of Education, Deb Neary, driving her gender ideology through these sex education standards. Horrible things they wanted to teach our kids. And it was parents all across the state who rallied and stood up and went to those State Board of Education meetings, who sent in emails and letters and phone calls by the thousands, 10-1 against those standards. They got that State Board of Education to stop. And still they're not listening. So Pat Tim resigned. I replaced her with Kirk Penner. Kirk has done a fantastic job on the board. He is the only person voting for one vote to permanently get rid of those sex education standards and to not bring it up again. All the other members have voted to bring it back again. We have 4 seats up this year for that State Board of Education. We have to elect Kirk Penner and replace the other 3 members that are on that board that are pushing this radical agenda. And we have one of those people running in this office, or in this room today. Elizabeth Techmeyer is running to take on that board. We have to have conservative leadership on that State Board of Education to protect our kids. It matters. Elections matter. We see it all over. We've got the same issues in the legislature. We got a very important bill that is coming up this week, LB 933. That is Joni Albright's bill to ban abortion in the state if Roe versus Wade gets overturned in the Supreme Court. It is a bill that if the Supreme Court throws out Roe versus Wade and sends that decision back to the states where it properly belongs, right? This is what our founders envisioned. The powers not designated the federal government fall to the states.
And the people.
And the people.
That's it.
There is no penumbral right to privacy in the Constitution. You can read it backwards and forwards. You're never going to find it. So if the Supreme Court does the right thing and overturns Roe versus Wade, we will have the opportunity here in Nebraska to protect those pre-born babies. That is what 933 does. Folks, we got to pull from committee because the Judiciary Committee wouldn't send it out. It's going to be debated on the floor this week. Contact your state senators. Let them know they need to break the filibuster that is almost certainly to happen on 933.
We need Omaha Lincoln to break the filibuster.
I know we need the help of Omaha Lincoln too. Trust me, I'm saying the same thing there too. We have to support this bill. We have another big government socialism debate that's going to happen this week as well. There's a thing called the Emergency Rental Assistance Program.
It needs to go
This is a program as part of the whole overall pandemic response from the Biden administration. You know, that $1.9 trillion I was talking about. Now, excuse me, we all recognize when we have emergencies like floods or tornadoes that we need extra assistance. Nebraskans are always great about helping out the neighbors. We saw it in the floods of 2019. Neighbors just showing up to help clean up farmers' fields. I mean, I talked to farmers with tears in their eyes when they thought about all these strangers just showing up and say, hey, we know you had a hard time this flood, can we help you clean up your land? That's what Nebraskans do. And we do it at the state and federal level as well. When we have that flood, we ask for assistance, or that tornado. But we also have to acknowledge at some point the emergency's over. And we don't ask for that assistance anymore. We ended the pandemic emergency here in the state last June. And the second round of ERAP funding. This is big government socialism. It's not even tied to the pandemic anymore. This is just let's pay somebody's rent for 3 years. Folks, this is getting people addicted to government.
That's right.
This is big government socialism.
Absolutely.
And this is what the Biden administration is trying to enforce on us.
They're communists.
And now in Omaha Center, Justin Wayne. Obviously, let me take a step back. I refuse to take the second round of VRAP. I said we don't need it here. So Justin Wayne, one of our state senators from Omaha, went to the Biden administration and got them to put out new Treasury guidance just 2 days ago, or 3 days ago now, that said, oh, well, we're going to reallocate that money to Omaha and Lincoln, trying to pit our urban versus rural centers against each other. I vetoed the bill that would require me to take ERAP. This week is the veto override fight. We need to hold our Republican senators to not take that money. I can't control what the federal government's going to do, but here in Nebraska, we do not want big government socialism.
That's right.
We have to fight this bill, and that's what this is about. And Senator Urban, I appreciate all your help on all these bills, because I know you've been a rock-solid conservative all up and down when we've been fighting these battles. We see this all at all levels of government. Conservative policies matter. And those policies are determined by the leadership you elect. Now, it's great to see everybody here this morning. But folks, we need more. We need more people. We need to have an army out there. You're our arms and legs. You are the folks that go out there and knock doors, put up signs, make phone calls. And I want each and every person in this room to dedicate themselves to vote 10 times this election. Not the Chicago way 10 times. Not the Chicago way 10 times. I want you to all go out and commit to getting 9 other people involved in this election. We have to get conservatives elected. We need you to go out and talk to your friends, and families, and neighbors, and coworkers. Engage them. And folks, I have seen this all across the state. We saw it with the State Board of Education fiasco this summer, or last summer, where people are getting involved in elections that were never involved before, getting involved in politics, seeing the problems of not getting involved. Independents and Republicans who've never been involved before. Now, folks know you pay attention to politics. That's why you're here this morning. They look to you. Help them. Help them get involved, get engaged. Engage them in elections. Engage them here in the party. Let them know how they can help out and make sure that we can win elections. Because, folks, it matters. We have to make sure we get conservatives elected at all levels of government. We've got to do our part to make sure that we're retaking the House this year to stop this horrible Biden agenda. And then in 2 years, we have to replace this president with a Republican who will understand what a strong country means. But it takes you, and it starts today. So please, continue to get out there and work hard. Now remember also, we have a primary that's coming up here May 10th. Early voting is going to start Monday. Well, I went through primaries, contested primary.
Early voting.
Actually, all my races, I think, been contested at one level or another. They make us better candidates. But we also have to remember that after that primary, we have to come together to make sure that we beat the Democrats in November. That is what we have to do to take back our country. We have to win in November at every level of government. It's not good enough just to go at the top of the ballot. We have to get all these races. All these races are going to be important. Whether we're talking about county board, whether we're talking about the Public Service Commission, the State Board of Education, legislature. Every office is important because that determines who those people are and those decisions are going to be made. And that's why it's so important you're here today. And Colleen, I want to thank you very much for organizing the county convention here today. And I want to encourage you all to stay involved and get more people. We need an army. This has the potential for us to be a wave election year like 2010 was. But it only happens if we're involved. If we get involved and get people, other people involved as well. So thank you again for being here today. I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to be here on a Saturday morning. And I look forward to working with you as we go to November to retake our country. God bless you all, and God bless the great state